And I remember at that moment, I could be like, I could, tuck my tail between my legs and walk out of here and, go back to working at Best Buy and that's it.
Hey, welcome to The Big Story. I'm Alex Morrissey. Thanks for joining. This week's been a real busy week. My wife's been away in Portugal, having a wonderful time. And I've been tearing everything out of closets and trying to organize and clear things out so I'm not making a mess while she's here. And I'm also writing fiendishly every morning. I talk about ADD on the show often with the guests, and it's a real struggle to stay on track. And I have a lot of things I try to do every day in order to keep myself in order, and, meditation and journaling. And another thing that I do is employ the Pomodoro method. I think it's called that. It's working for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. And you do this just sequentially. So I have a timer set up where I get to my writing desk at 9 o'clock, hit go. And then for the next 3 to 4 hours, it's head down, write. And then these 5-minute gaps, quickly check an email, reply, do small tasks that I can cross off my list that I wrote down in my journal in the morning. And hopefully by the end of the session, have a lot more than I started off with, which is usually the case if I take the time to focus on what I need to do. So if I do my job correctly in the morning to say, hey, this is the chunk that you need to get through, I'm pretty good at getting through that. If I use all these stupid tools to get my head in order. Another thing that I do is listen to music. And my guest today is Jeffry Allen Love. It's a great talk. Really excited to share this one. But Jeff brings it up that he, listens to music with no words for purpose. But my purpose is that they distract me when I'm trying to write words. So I can't really, I will end up writing lyrics if I end up at a keyboard listening to songs. So I don't know if anybody else has similar struggles or what they do. For me, it is a part-time job to do my full-time job. Anyway, as I said, today I'm talking to Jeffry Allen Love. And if you're not familiar with his work, lucky you, because you get a chance to experience what he does, which is make images that are transportational devices. And I'm just thrilled to spend some time with somebody who thinks so deeply about the work they do and the intention of their craft. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jeffry Allen Love as much as I did.
You can't tell if you made the right choice with kids, like you made a choice. You're stuck with it. I don't know. I think it was that era, or at least, I'm 44. So my parents were, from pretty young, older era. I don't think people thought about that, and then my mom, I think, struggled with that when we were 16, 17, 18, about to leave the house, like being like, oh, I've given up my life for these children and who am I? And, had to figure that out for herself.
Yeah. I think my mom turned that more into guiding me, which I did everything I could to go away from that. So,
yeah,
but that's just how it goes. How's the work going?
Good. I'm finishing up a book with Flesk. I'm doing a bunch of covers for Dark Horse for I don't know how they feel about spoiling or whatever, but I'm doing covers for a new Cyberpunk 2077 series there. Doing something for Image, and for the last 3 years, I've been talking to 8 or 10 different writers that, about doing a comic, and I'm just sort of waiting to see which one actually, writes the series and,
right.
and pulls through. And they're all people I want to work with. And, they're people that I'm willing to wait for, because I want to work with a writer I like and respect, so that I can learn from them and their process, and then steal all of their techniques to use for my book next. So kind of do like the one with them, one for me, one for them, one with me. And actually I was talking to Brian Evanson, who's a writer I really like. Do you know Brian Evanson's work?
I know his name. I don't know him. Yeah.
He's a speculative writer. I've done a cover for Tor for him, but he liked one of my books and asked if he could use a line from it for a short story of his, and dedicated the story to me. And so we've gotten to know each other, and I'm trying to get him to write a comic, because I think it would be a lot of fun to. He's become really well known for his short story collections in the last like 5 or 6 years. He writes really amazing speculative novels too. So it seems like there's a lot of stuff in the air. It was kind of like a good, and it's okay now, because I've been such a, with the pandemic and being a dad, that I feel like I've had enough on my plate that actually it probably would have been a nightmare to get like a comic book with somebody else in the last little bit.
You said how many of there were you growing up?
My brother, I have a younger brother.
Okay.
We actually live near each other now, which is the first time we've ever lived near each other as adults. My family was military, and so we moved all the time, and also separately at some points. My mom and dad had different stations, so I'm just used to never living anywhere longer than 2 or 3 years, and never living around my family. And it's only now in the last, I think I've been here 1.5 years. And now my brother lives 10 minutes away, and we can go out and get a beer and stuff like that. So it's been I've never had that, so it's been really cool.
Oh, that is really cool. So what bases did you grow up on?
Well, we almost always lived off base, which was really cool. We lived in a village called Winnweiler in Germany. We lived in Germany for 6 years when I was pretty little. And I loved it. It was awesome. Growing up there, and having the imagination of a little kid, like you didn't have to imagine very hard, because there was a castle that we could walk to, and my brother and I could walk there and play in the woods and pretend we were storming the castle. And, every weekend we would go visit castles. Like we would watch the movie Ivanhoe, and then we'd go to the castle where they actually had King Richard, locked up as a hostage. Schloss Frankenstein, and see what inspired Frankenstein. So it was a really cool experience. One of the most vivid memories of my life is driving along the coast of France, and it's all foggy, and we come around this corner and the fog lifts, and there's Mont Saint Michel, rising out of the ocean. And it's very I'm sure it had a ton to do with the imagery that I make, that for 6 years I was running around German forests and castles and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, please go ahead.
Well, I was talking with Kyle Webster, who does all the digital brushes for Adobe. And he grew up around the world too. And I think there's this added software installation that happens to young brains when you're not living in the common, American, upbringing, when you have American parents. So you have this sort of connection to the US, but you live in this non-suburban lifestyle. I feel
like an outsider. I don't feel like I belong anywhere. I've never really felt American, and as a child, it was before really the internet or any of that. So it was very removed from American culture, and so, or even pop culture. Really, like I lived in Korea for high school, and I love Korea. I wish I could move back. But I was totally removed from from all culture. And then when I went to college and, went to a party and hear this music, I was like, oh, this is great. Are these people touring anytime soon? It's like, these are the Beatles. Oh, cool. The Beatles. Like, are they American? And it's like, no, they're like this, the most culturally relevant band of the last, 50 years. But I was totally ignorant to so much because I was just in my own little world of reading books and drawing and, all that stuff and very distant from like just what other people grew up with. And at the time I hated it. I wished I had friends that, went to, multiple grades with and family connections and, like a hometown. But then when I got older, I really appreciated that lifestyle. But now I'm also trying to give my children the exact opposite. I want them to grow up here and have friends and have family and a support structure and, feel safe and welcomed by a large, grow up with a community feeling that I never had, which, who knows, I bet they would really love, traveling the world and all the stuff that I did. But I guess we always try to give our children what we think they should have, what we
sure.
lack.
Yeah. I think that it's that what we lack element. I know that when we were considering having kids, we kept talking about both of our parents are divorced. So it was this kind of thing like, well, we want to have Christmas at our own home. Like there was this sort of like, we're going to stay planted and everyone, if they want to come, they can come and they're welcome to, because, I know I had to travel to different states, every Christmas just to fulfill somebody else's, thing.
Yeah.
You just do what you got to do. And then, it's really weird. Like we sort of have this sensibility of the life that I guess that we think we should have versus the life that we actually have.
I think that as I found as I get older, I think this is probably true for most people as they age, that you become way more comfortable with yourself and with your life, and you're more sure of who you are as a person, and you've made the mistakes of youth, and like you've learned from. Same thing in art. You discover your style or your way of working or your way of writing by writing a bunch of stuff and making mistakes and then saying like, oh, I actually like this version of mistakes. I'll keep doing that. Same thing with life. Like we kind of grow up and have to go through these trials and tribulations and come out of it. And it may not be the dream, but whose life is really, like I don't think anybody's life is truly the dream and so much of modern life is about presenting a shiny dream to other people on the surface through social media and things like that. How much of that is manufactured? I think that definitely for myself, I had to take a step back from social media and find pleasure and comfort in my own life and what I had, and then. But taking that break, I was able to go back to social media and use it in a way that felt comfortable to me without being the dopamine rush of the mouse getting the pellet every time they push the button.
Right. What was it for you that was the emotional conflict aspect?
I think it was. It ties into a lot of things in terms of, and this is also illustration and not necessarily like comic stuff, but I hated that every year you're entering Society of Illustrators or Spectrum or all these different places and you're judging your work yearly. And maybe work takes longer than a year, and if you don't get in, your work doesn't have any value. Or if the best piece you've ever painted that you love, that was the greatest learning experience, only gets 30 likes, then it makes you feel bad.
Yeah.
So there's something wrong with that. But the honest truth for me is that social media was just during the pandemic. I went from, and also having kids and getting married, I went from being a freelancer who could do anything, anytime. My work was, quitting time is one so I can watch European soccer. And that's why I'm a freelancer, really. Just I can catch every Liverpool game. but so then the pandemic hit, and I went from that to having to take care of two very small children all the time in a very fraught environment and in a very small house. And then my mother died. And that combination of very little sleep, having to take care of two small children, and then my mother passing away just like overwhelmed me. Yeah. And I'll probably get a little emotional here, so cut the wavering in my voice. But it was too much, it was I was across the country and I couldn't be there for my mother. And it just was hard, and I think that and I'm still dealing with this, and that's why we moved, a big part of why we moved. That family became more important. But I think there's so many people that have this story from the last 3 or 4 or 5 years of you never know what anybody has gone through or what anybody is currently going through or what they could be struggling with. And then to have this thing happen, I needed a break from the world, and I only needed to listen to the voices that were like primary importance to me: my wife, my children, my brother, my dad, my close circle of friends. And there's just too much. There's too much. Everybody is a great artist. There's so many brilliant artists. There's so many great writers that are writing so many cool books. There's so many people giving films an option. There's so many people, and at a certain point, you just have to you gotta take a break from that. Or at least I did, and become healthy again, and then come back to it.
Yeah, I struggle with the social media thing. Facebook being sort of the early model out there, and I really struggled with my sense of self and other people's air quote reality for a while. And my solution for that was just stopping, period. Like just got off of that one completely. And then I stopped leaving my phone in the bedroom. Like my phone charges in a different room when I sleep. So when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do isn't go and look at my phone.
Get an alarm clock that's not on your phone. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. So I get up and then I meditate. The first thing I do, get up and meditate, just so I don't waste whatever clarity I have in my head, and I can hopefully carry that a little further. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think isolation was a very common feeling during the pandemic. So social media is this sort of balm to that order where like, hey, you can keep tabs on everything. Yeah.
I think I quit social media at the wrong time in terms of social media engagement, because tons of people, and it was wonderful that tons of artists were selling a lot of work through social media, and there was a lot more engagement. So I noticed that a lot of people, had a lot more followers when I came back to it, which is fantastic. But I needed to do it, and I did during the pandemic. I did get reconnected with. I was in a band in my 20s, and so I got reconnected with those guys, and we it's still going. We now, although mostly with just one or two other guys, we still get together on Saturdays at 4:30 and have a beer while Zooming with each other and just kind of talk and catch up about life.
Right on.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It is nice. I mean, I don't know if that's social media, so to speak. That's just a different communication tool. Yeah. What'd you play? Well,
kind of a theme of my life is that I can do a lot of things, but none of them very well. So I could play violin. I would play violin. I would play guitar. I would play drums. Sing. We were kind of like a very communist band. Like we would. I'd start off playing drums in a song, and then halfway through, I'd switch with the guitar player and play guitar while he plays drums, and a bunch of different lead singers and a bunch of different songwriters. It was a lot of fun to do. I hated being 20% of decision making, and I hated. It was the same thing where in college I was a filmmaking major for 3 years, but this was back when you had to raise money to buy film to actually shoot the film.
Right.
for your senior project. And I was shooting films before that, and it became quickly apparent that nobody cares about what you're doing except for you. You know, nobody shows up on time. Nobody holds the microphone when they're supposed to. Nobody like hits their marks. So, like, you have this great vision of what you want to have happen, but everybody else is just, you know, like doing their thing. And it's, you know, it was never good. So I switched to creative writing, which allowed me to, you know, like all I have to do is write the screenplay. That's what I like about art is, and especially comics, you know, is that I get to tell stories and I get to, you know, make images. The only thing I don't get is the music or the sound, but I love being the you know, the auteur, the dictator. I don't like things where I'm, you know, like just a small portion of and it never goes anywhere, you know, and nobody's ever happy. And that's kind of what the band was for me, is that I was never driven to get better the way that I am with art. With art, I'm very driven to improve and learn the things that because I have tons of weaknesses. And when it comes to art, which is actually something I think about a lot, because with illustration and book covers is where I kind of view my career really starting. I don't really count the editorial newspapers and magazine era of my life. You're just making one image, so you can lean on your strengths really hard and forget about your weaknesses. And comics will expose your weaknesses like that, like immediately. If you are, you know, I come from, you know, my influences are Battaglia and Topi and Breccia and people like that. Really interesting mark making, but also really flat and not much like moment to moment cuts, but one big designy page is 3 months in life, you know? And so if you're trying to do a fight scene in that sort of very flat design thing, you're working like way harder than you have to figure everything out. And it takes forever. And so that's something that I'm learning now, is that I'm very lucky that I got hooked up with Felix Liu and the artist that he represents. And Nick Dragata I asked him for some advice. He sent me this amazing email that I printed out and I've kind of used as like my study guide for the last 2 years. And at Heroes, I got to walk around with him and have him like show me comics that I should look at to study, to, you know, like address them. And it's it's so kind of him. But to me, that's exciting. You know, like there's still so much to learn and so much to try to figure out. And I'm driven to do it. Whereas in the band, you know, it was just a bunch of my college friends that we got together and drank beer and, you know, made music. And, you know, the scene that I was in was very successful, but I just didn't care, you know.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that there's a social component to the music aspect. You know, you're doing this event with other people, for other people. It's sort of in a live factor. But in comics, there's really no sort of live version of it. And you are doing it by yourself. Even if you have collaborators, they're not there with you doing it at the same time. So it makes it a little... So either you're going to be able to push yourself to do it and get better, or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. No one cares unless you do it. No one cares unless you should. And this is a lesson I needed to learn in my 30s. You know, I was able to kind of coast through life and not grow up. You know, I was a very deep bloomer. And it took some pretty serious things to happen in my life to hit rock bottom, essentially, and realize that the only way, there's no going down anymore, really. And the way to go up is to work hard. And the only person that cares about this is you. You know, no one's going to do it for you. You're not going to get hired or get a career because of your potential or your desire to you know, be this great artist or this great writer. It only matters if you do it. And that's the only way that people will be excited about your work. But that's actually very freeing in a way, that it's up to you, you know, and it's, you know, from the, you know, thousands of comics and books on art and things that I have here, there have been millions of people throughout history that have done what you want to do. And so all it takes is, it helps if you can find mentors. Like I found Nick Dragata for comics, for that, and other people and people that I've had in my illustration career. It helps if you can have mentors because it cuts out some parts, but it really just comes down to you.
I had that sort of that 30s sort of come to awaken moment in life. And it was one of those like, okay, I have to do this. And you're fortunate and blessed if you have enough talent to open a door, but you really it's all about you staying inside. Like if someone opens it, that's not it. And I thought that's what the deal was when I was in my 20s. I'm like, oh, well, the door's open. Now I can do what I want. But that's not how it goes. It really is a matter of you have to prove yourself every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and that to me, that's exciting. Like I said, I'm 44 and I have to work out so that I can keep up with my children so they don't, destroy me in our Pokemon battles every night. And I have to stay in shape because I hope that I feel like my career has not really started yet, even though if you look at my bio, it seems like it's impressive, but I feel like I always wanted to do comics. I've always wanted to, I was going to go to the Joe Kubert school. My dad, military dad didn't want to pay for art school. So
what?
Yeah. So I was going to go to art school and I was going to go to the Joe Kubert school, which would have been a horrible mistake because I was getting a loan from a bank, like that would have been such a bad mistake. I would have been miserable and I couldn't have paid them back. But I was going to go and then my band signed a record deal. And so I was like, this won't happen again. I should do this for a while, which it was I think saved me from probably going down a path of like really enjoying going to that school and then being like, oh my gosh, I've got $100,000 in bank loans, not student loans, bank loans.
Right.
But I hope that my career, I'm trying to stay healthy so that I can have 40 years more. And that's like, I'd be 84. That's pushing it. But yeah. But I hope that my best work is ahead of me, and I hope I continue to find ways to push myself and get better and try different things.
Well, I think that's and this is an interesting exercise and, mental exercise is that you think of all these artists that you like, and then you can see a point where they stop wowing you. And it's not a question of, and I wondered why it stopped wowing me. And it wasn't because I figured out their secret. It was more in the sense that, they stopped pushing. Like that, whatever was making them so great, they never really continued on that. They sort of, when I use the term simplified, it's like they simplified whatever they were doing to get the sort of that result. And it wasn't a simplification like Alex Toth simplifies something to get more to an essence. It was the simplification for alacrity, not for, clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then there are the artists who continue to wow, and they do these things that they can, your mind just goes, wow. And like Jules Pfeiffer or, these illustrators who continue to impress, like Marshall Arisman never kind of coasted.
Right.
And so you got time.
I was reading, Luther Strode, the Tradmore, complete thing. And it was apparent from like the beginning, the first 6 issue, I forget what they're all called because I read the complete edition, but the first 6-issue miniseries, it's obvious that he's like very talented and very, very good. And then the second thing is like, wow, he is still like, he's getting better. He's like getting better and he can do everything well. And then the third part was just like, oh my God. Like, I didn't think that I could but I turned the first couple of pages of the legacy of Luther Strode, I think it's called. And the change in his art was like, just, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was just such a leap and a creative, very brave one. And it's amazing to me that he has such a unique and he's continued to evolve it, but it was such a huge and brave leap to make that decision to go that way, where so many other people would have regress towards house style, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know, something I was reading this last week where I was blown away by the leap that he made there. It was really, really cool and very inspiring.
Yeah. And I don't think any of that stuff happens without a lot of sweat equity. I think there's just, I've been writing every day at the bottom of my journal page. Every day in the morning, I write, read more, think more, write more, like every single day. So I just keep reminding myself like these sort of foundational elements, my mind, just keep that in mind about everything. Yeah. And if I was drawing, it would be, read more, think more, draw more, if that was the case.
Yeah. It's important to know what your like the most important things are. And I think my military upbringing, while I hated it, we would go to Disney World and my dad would hand out laminated time schedules for everybody. It's like, are you kidding me? It's like, wake up at 5, okay? Breakfast 5:15, get on the bus. And it's like, I'm 6, Dad. Like, do I really need a laminated schedule for the entire week? And, wake us up at 1 a.m. to watch Tennessee football in South Korea. It's things like that. But it worked out really well now because I'm, and I think also illustration for deadlines. I can hit any deadline. I can, except for the one with Flusk. I'm sorry, John. But I'm very organized when it comes to that. And I have a whiteboard over here that has at the top, it has the things that are my priorities. And then below that are the things below those priorities. And, and goes down from that. I have the next 12 months of my life over on a corkboard over there, it's important to know what you want in your life and also what you don't want. I think, stop watching NFL games. You don't like football. Why do you watch it? Things like that.
Same.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Your friends show up and want to drink a beer and it's like, yeah, sure. I'll wait 4 hours of my life watching commercials and occasionally there'll be a little bit of sport in between it. But I think that you do something that I would tell myself is that every day you get the chance to be who you want to be, but you have to make that, you kind of have to make that decision every morning. And it's actually helpful for me to make it at night before I go to bed as I write it down. And then I see it when I wake up in the morning. And that tells me, today is about this project, but also making sure that I do this thing for myself, which is, copy one page of Akira, see what, learn from that. Or copy, pulling out. And Eduardo Rizzo is super inspiring. Oh, yeah. Because I feel like he's a bridge from Breccia and Battaglia and all the sort of the other South American comic artists that came to Europe. He's a bridge from that sort of flat and Topi, the Italian and South American guys. He's a bridge from that to American comics, and things where he doesn't do the very rigid perspective grids. A lot of times he has foreground, midground, background, and they're sort of tilted at different planes to each other. And so when I'll take a panel like this and look at it, and this line is totally out of perspective with the rest of the composition. And it's like, well, why is it? But if you simplify it, you kind of see storytelling wise, cinematically, it's pointing where he's leading the eye where he wants you to go. And he's so good at designing. He's so good at design. The perspective manipulations don't jump out at you. It feels right because he's designing it to have it do this thing where it leads you through the story. And I love doing that stuff. If money wasn't an object, I could spend the rest of my life just, dissecting comic books and,
Listen, it's not too, Jeff, it's not too late to get the PhD and just get the PhD in comic book visual storytelling in the modern age.
I have no desire to ever go to or teach at or visit a school ever again. I'm happy in my little studio here.
Okay. Pitch over. Right. So you couldn't herd the cats with the film sets. So you switched to creative writing.
Yeah.
And what was the thought process about creative writing for you? Like, were you like, okay, I can't control the other people, but I can control characters on the page?
Right. I can, it's all about me and my work. And
right.
Also knowing that, that I want to tell stories, and with comic, like with everything I've done in my life, it all leads to wanting to be a better storyteller. Not necessarily becoming a better artist or becoming a better writer, but telling better stories. And I think that it was just, I like being the person in charge of that. And with the kind of stories that I love, are budget wise, you could never do with, like a student film, at least then. Nowadays, you probably could. It's a much different time now with digital stuff. But yeah, I think that just, I've always wanted to, I'll grab the book. My parents, when I lived in Germany, came back from a trip to England with this book. It was illustrated by
Tales of King Arthur. Yeah.
And it's illustrated by Victor Ambras, probably my favorite illustrator. And I was obsessed with this, and it kind of like influenced my thinking about art, is that it always went with stories. It always went with words. And so it was like, I want to do both. I want to, this is, there we go.
Yeah.
The perspective here of taking the knight at the bottom and flattening him out.
Yep.
Of he's not in perspective, but the design works. The design feels right. And so that sort of playfulness of design combined with realism, I've always loved that. And I love his work, but this book in particular made me be like, not only I didn't really realize that there was one illustrator and one writer, I was too young to know that. It was more that there's pictures and there's words that go with them, and you do them both. And this book was very, it's definitely the reason I wanted to become an artist and to write my own stories.
So when you were in school, like when you were in college, were you like, okay, I'm going to become a novelist? What was the thought process?
Who knows? I have no idea what, so it's crazy to me that, first, college is crazy because of the price for most people. But I think that, to think that an 18-year-old should decide what they're going to do with the rest of their life and then go to school for it is nuts. It's insane. And so I don't think I had any idea of what I wanted to do other than I made friends and I was in a band and I loved creative stuff. And my dad didn't want me to go to art school. And the art program at the school I went to was all color fields and paint your feelings. And that's not the stuff that I wanted to do. And so the next best thing was I loved films and so started doing that. And then the whole thing of realizing that this is going to be, for me, a nightmare. And so, if I can write a really good script, I can then, after school, maybe find a way to get it made. And then, life just keeps happening. And, I went back to school when I was 29 or 30, I think, for a year. And it amazed me how easy it was then compared to being an 18-year-old at school, where and it was my priorities had changed, and so to realize it's like, oh, you just want me to spend an hour tonight drawing this thing? Sure. Like, no problem. Right. Whereas you'd be like, man, I don't have time for this. Like, I got so much stuff to do. And it's, so I think, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was still like, I was a little kid until I was 35 and had to figure out my life. And, I still feel like, like I'm 16 most of the time. It's hard to believe I'm almost 50. So it's, I talk with my wife and she wants to send our children to school, to college. And I'm just like, why? Like, let them, like, if it makes sense for them, if they want to do something that involves,
sure.
But maybe they want to go, like travel for a year or, do the Peace Corps or something. But
there has to be something, because like, I don't know if I needed to go off to art, art school. I know I benefited from it in many, many ways. I mean, I was able to, become friends with people who are all focused on the same thing, I was able to make connections with professionals, and I was able to get into the offices of Marvel in DC because I was in that location. But
you wanted to be an artist, right? So,
oh yeah.
Right. So like you had a vision of where you wanted to go, which totally makes sense for going to school. But I think, for a lot of kids, I had no idea what I wanted to be other than I liked comics.
For sure.
I liked movies. So I totally, I'm all for it if you have a vision of where you want to go. And also it's important to, be on your own and make friends and, become your own person. But I feel like
there should be that transition. Like if you don't know, like there shouldn't be this like, okay, you're 18 now off to college. And it's like, but I don't know. It's tough. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I know kids who are going off and getting degrees, and they're getting the same degree as their older sibling just because that seems like a safe thing to do versus what is it that they want to do?
Yeah.
That's rough.
It's hard.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll solve the whole educational, the secondary schooling level of education by the time your kids are older.
Right. At the same time, they figure out healthcare, right? No.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
Healthcare, secondary education, gun control. We'll get
all of it. It'll be
everything.
No. So, okay. I know that you feel that you said that your career is just getting underway, despite the CV and despite the evidence of the work that you've produced. But how did you leave a band and then say, I'm going to become an illustrator? Did you just say this, or what were the dance moves?
My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was going to go to school in Virginia, and I decided that I would go. And I saw that George Pratt was teaching at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond.
Oh, cool.
Like maybe an hour's drive from where my wife was, or my girlfriend at the time. And so I applied and got in. I was like, all right, sweet. I love George Pratt's work. I'm going to become a comic book illustrator, and, this is going to be amazing. And then I drove down there for the first day of class. I was like, all right, I'm here to see George Pratt. And like, oh, he just left for Ringling last semester, and he's, he started teaching at Ringling in Florida now. So then I had a bunch of really, really boring, bad classes at VCU. But I met a couple of professors that I still am friends with that were great, that sadly weren't teaching me for the most part. But I kept seeing all these kids around, like at the figure drawing and stuff like that had these amazing sketchbooks, just so cool, and weird paintings and great drawings. And so I would ask them, where's that at? And they all had gone to this program called the Illustration Academy, which had started with Mark English, Bernie Fuchs, Alan Kober, all these, sort of the last hurrah of the golden age of illustration, the guys that had mansions outside of New York City and, had drivers pick up the art to take into the city, that sort of thing. This really just superstars of illustration, this program, they had all gone to that for the summer. And at that time, I want to say it was 8 weeks. During the summer, you would go and spend 8 weeks with these people doing, all this work. So I went and one of the teachers of that who had been a student was named Sterling Hunley. He's an illustrator. And I just got in touch with him and found out that he had office hours. And like most 18-year-olds, nobody took him up on his office hours. Like he was required to be in his office for 4 hours every week, and no one ever showed up. And I showed up every office hour for about 6 months. I would just show up. I would always have something to show him. And I would say, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I want to be a good artist. I know I'm not that good. Here's an artist I like. What are they doing? What is really good about this? And he would sit down with me and show me, and we would just talk. And then I went to the Illustration Academy, and it was very humbling. I was probably the worst student there. I've told this story a lot of times, but I put up my first piece for critique, and John English, Mark English's son, looked at it, and then he turned around and was like, "It's like you've never painted before." And
wow.
was like, well, I haven't. Like that is my first painting ever. And I remember that moment of you always want, like, the initial, what we all want is to be told how special we are and how great we are without any work. And I remember at that moment, I could be like, I could, tuck my tail between my legs and walk out of here and go back to working at Best Buy and that's it, or I can say, no, this is the moment where I make a choice where I stink. I'm not that good. I'm going to get better and I'm going to work really, really hard at it. And so I did. And I was like, and I'm going to get invited back as a teacher here and they're going to put me on the poster of this thing. And, like, I'm going to show them. And, it's good to have art. It's good to have arch enemies. It's good to have nemesis.
Yeah.
And I did. I was invited back to teach there and I had my art on the poster. And I wasn't so angry at that point, but, it's good to have some fire in you, something to drive you. And so then I ended up dropping out of art school and I apprenticed with Sterling. And I did that for a couple of years. And that sort of naturally transitioned out of apprenticeship to sort of partnership. And then I kept delaying trying to get work. I thought I wasn't good enough. I thought I was too derivative of other people. And I could have made a living earlier, I think. But I just kept waiting. And then it was like, all right, it's now or never. Sent out a portfolio and within 2 months was working as a full-time illustrator, which I thought at the time was great. It's like, oh God, I'm making a living from art. And then it's like, but I'm making a living at really dumb assignments at art.
Right.
Like, this is about a cannon that shoots hamburgers over highways. And we want to, like, hamburger being shot up. And I remember, like painting the hamburger being shot out of the cannon and saying like, oh, was this the dream? Like, is this
right?
Is this what I wanted to be? Is this what I want to be known for? Or to the legacy I'd like to leave behind, or how I'd like to spend my day? Like so many things, it takes pain or suffering for us to like have change. And so you can be in this thing and you want it to change, but you resist it. And then my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and as a cancer that runs genetically, so it was recommended that I get tested for it. And the first tests were positive, and so it went from like, oh, you've got the rest of your life out in front of you to you could die in 5 years.
Yeah, right.
And so I had a month of doing all these medical tests, and I was like, all right, if I don't have that much longer, what would I want to do? And I've always loved science fiction and fantasy books. So I was like, okay, I'll just make a portfolio of science fiction fantasy pieces. And at the end of the month, it was a false positive. I didn't have cancer. I have to get tested every 3 to 5 years to see if it's manifesting. But I had a clean bill of health at the time, and I had a portfolio of stuff that I would like to make. And so I started sending it out and started getting work. And that was great. And I had to get most of my work at the beginning from the UK because they're more open to non-airbrushy, realistic stuff. And it kind of took my work being accepted and talked about in the UK for American audiences, other than Irene Gallo at Tor, to say, okay, we'll hire him. But then as things go in life again, it was like, that's actually not what you really want. Like, I feel like doing covers for other people. I'm in a cover band. I'm singing someone else's song. And so, covers are great, like
sure.
A good cover band, or even a good cover, George Harrison doing Nina Simone, one of my favorites ever, but you're still singing someone else's song. And for myself that wants to tell my own stories, it's like, oh, this is amazing, but it's also not what you want to do. And so then that led to me starting to do books with Flesk, and then it was like, and even this is like a lot of fun, but I really want to do comics. And sort of been sneaking up on them with the books I do through Flesk, but it's like, here's a silent comic, so I don't have to put any words in it and learn how to letter.
Yeah.
here's and almost like, sneaking up on comics and leaning on my strengths and avoiding my weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm at the point where, again, coming out of heartbreak and pain and suffering, making me realize, like, open yourself up, and there's no reason to hide that you don't know some things yet, and that you still are learning, and you're still trying to get better, and there's no ego, and there's no sort of like, playing it cool around other people. Just be yourself.
So wait, that's why you're wearing the sunglasses when I met you, right? Just having that.
I don't think
sunglasses.
I don't think I own a pair of sunglasses. But yeah, it's maybe this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. As I get older, I lose any sort of like pretense of being cool or like having to kind of keep up that like an image or anything like that. And it's totally okay to say, like, these I'm still learning how to draw cars, like stuff like that. Like, it's still a struggle. It's so I think that my life has always been a progression towards telling my own stories through comics, telling stories. And life has just made me take various, like detours and various, road trips and distractions, which have all actually like been probably very, very helpful, because of I think my work, if I'd gone to the Kubert School at 22, I think was when I would have gone, my work would probably be a lot different than it is now.
Yeah.
If I had gone there and done the schooling as it was then, versus going where I went and being more inspired by Topi and Battaglia and the Breccias, and then actually eventually learning from George Pratt, to where my work became more art history inspired, which includes comics for me, instead of just comics inspired. And so I think that all the meandering has led me here, and now it's up to me to pull it all together and make things that hopefully other people will like.
Well, and I say it often about, there's no way you can plan a creative career. Like, there is no sort of, because even like, I said, I wanted to draw comic books, and I went to college to study to draw comic books, and I graduated and I started drawing comic books. I'm not drawing comic books anymore. It's been over 20 years since I've drawn a comic book. And that's because your interests evolve and they change, and realities also crash upon your dream in the terms of, like, maybe this is not the best thing for you to do, or maybe you're not the best person at doing this thing. And so you have to kind of go, okay, what is it that I can do? Or what are my strengths, and how can I apply them to something else?
I found that often when I'm unhappy, it's because I have a rigid definition of something, of who I am supposed to be, or what the work I'm doing is supposed to look like. And it's actually my own definition of what it should be that makes me unhappy. And if I kind of like say, like, okay, what is it that you're actually trying to do here? And remove, or what is the definition that's holding you back? I can become a lot happier, where I'm, remove this sort of rigid sense of who should I be? It's, like I need to be like Jerome Opeña, like, oh, you got to draw like him because he's like so amazing. And I was like, no, you need to be yourself. You can learn from him. You'll just be you'll be a copy of a copy if you do that. And that definition of what good art is holding you back from making good art that would look like you. Mm-hmm. So it's, our definition of ourselves is always, I think, evolving and changing when we work in creative careers. You went to Clarion, didn't you, for writing? Is that true?
No. I've participated with Clarion for fundraisers, so I do a lot of work for them. You're fun.
Well, I would love at some point, meet at a comic shop and talk about writing with you because I would love to pick your brain about that.
I mean, what are we a mere half hour apart?
Yeah,
so
not too far.
Yeah,
I need to figure out what the good comic stores are in Nashville sometime.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to introduce you to the shop owners. There's a few great shops here. And it's funny, like the whole writing thing for me, I guess it's similar to you, in that, like I was thinking when you were talking earlier about like that sort of controlling aspect. And I definitely have that internally. And I was thinking like, I wonder what he put his younger brother through. Like, do this, do that, like try to control the narrative.
It was actually my younger brother looks like a linebacker.
That answers that.
We don't look alike at all. And so to me, it was like all inside in my brain, I'm controlling you. Mm-hmm. But I was very quiet and internal because he could mop the floor with me. So it was, I think, it's kind of like all the nerdy Silicon Valley kids that are in power now and coming out and getting revenge for how they felt that they were,
mistreated.
Right. Like that we can have power over our creations, over our stories, over our, this is a place that we can do things. And, like I think about how when I write stories, Daniel Warren Johnson is really good at this, of writing really emotional stories about things that you can tell are important to him and can resonate emotionally. So, for what I like about writing something is that I can take my anger and my rage and my frustration and my despair over my mother having cancer, and I can write a story where I can personify that illness into something that I can beat the hell out of, and I can murder that because there's no way for me I cannot do anything about the situation that I'm in real life, but I can take this, what has happened and personify it in a conflict. And I love when I read a story where, and I think Daniel does that really well, of you can tell that there's his life in there somewhere, even though it's about cool spaceships and explosions and aliens and all the like fun stuff, that you want to draw. Yeah. There's an emotional core, and
that's the core of speculative fiction. You're taking this subtext and interlacing it with some sort of veneer of thing that either we're familiar with or we're unfamiliar with. But I'm going to tell you a story that means something. And sure, there might be space pirates blasting stuff or blowing things up, or this might be a world that we're familiar with, but everybody is left-handed. Who knows?
This will sound like I'm name dropping, so I'm sorry, but I was at a convention and I, through a very strange and unreproducible series of events, I ended up having a bromance with David Mitchell, and where David Mitchell, the writer of Cloud Atlas, where we went out, we went to a bar and we hung out, and he let me flip through his notebook and talk to him about what he was writing. Mm-hmm. And then we got breakfast the next day, and then we got together for lunch, and then we went in for a long walk through San Antonio to a museum and walked around a museum together and talked. And, I was just starstruck. He was so nice and made me feel so welcome around him and not like, like I was like an ant following Superman around. But I was, we were talking about various things, and I just had, I think my son was maybe a year old, and I used to have this studio that was a attachment off of our house, big barn opening. So, it was perfect when it was just my wife and I, but when you have a little kid and all of a sudden he's running in and out and jumping down and there's it wasn't really child proof. So there were lots of things he could hurt himself on. And I was talking to David and saying, I just wish I had a door that I could shut. And he said, but he's the thing you're going to write stories about. You need to have the door open and let him come in, because that's why you're writing stories. I was like, oh, David Mitchell, you jerk.
Yeah.
But it's true that these are the things that will raise a story above just giant monsters beat up superheroes and superheroes now win, is if it has an emotional core, if it has something that we respond to it emotionally, and often those it's about relationships and family or loved ones or whatever, and it's true that that I've found that the stories that I want to tell now, they do revolve around the things that from my family, my children. There's one book that I don't know if I have a copy of it out, but one time my wife was singing a lullaby to our son, and she, hush, little baby, don't you cry. And she got, had to start making up words because she ran out of the regular words. And so, Mama's going to build you a castle in the sky. And when that castle falls to the ground, Mama's going to cast you an iron crown. And when that crown, and she just kept going. And, she's obviously, she's, we get along well because she's seen like a George R. R. Martin novel to our child. And I was just like, oh my God, like I'm writing it down, like this is great. And I made a children's book about, sort of this hero's quest. That's sort of this cyclical thing of like a child's adventure, and had it published. And it's just purely because I was paying attention to what my wife was mumbling to our napping child.
And David's correct. I mean, it is really about taking the time to be present to everything around us, because that's where the stories come from. It's not this, they don't come fully formed, and they don't typically come with a flashing light. Like you have to kind of go, you have to put these pieces together that are in your life that you write down incessantly in notebooks, and
you have to be present. I have a perfect example of this. David and I were walking to the museum along the canal walk of San Antonio, and I was just lost in my head. Just like, oh, this is amazing. Like I'm with this writer that I love, and like, we're getting along and talking about things. And I was just lost in my own thoughts. And I realized that he had stopped. So I turned around, and he had taken out his phone and was taking a picture. And there was this sort of, 20-story building sort of in the distance, this perfect sort of office building, but there was one window that was broken out, and he was taking a picture of the one window that was broken. And it was just like, he was always looking for something, he was just aware of what was around him, and sort of, like the odd little moment, that would at some point make it into a book of his, I'm sure.
Well, what's interesting is it sounds to me he's doing is he is adapting our evolutionary trait of pattern recognition to capture moments that are not the pattern, but when the pattern is broken. So when you see that the pattern's broken, that means something's happened. Mm-hmm. So that's why we always go like, leaves are green, leaves are green, leaves are green, red leaf. Why is that leaf red? Sure. And that's the kind of, like we went for we had like the most disastrous hike last summer. We went up we were hiking up this area on the Blue Ridge, and my wife is like, oh, I've always wanted to go to this place. I'm like, all right, cool, let's go. And it was a downpour of rain that we had flash flooding like multiple times in this where there were 36 or 38 stream crossings we had to do with flash flooding. But at this one point, it started raining. So I'm like, hey, here's a tree. Let's go to this tree and just stay out of the rain. I walk up, and my legs stopped moving forward. And I couldn't figure out, why am I not walking towards the safety of this tree? And like the roots were sticking out into the sort of the sandy soil and rocks, but there was this one black stick there. And I'm like, and my body's going, do not walk any further. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I'm looking, and I'm tired. So my mind isn't really sharp. And I look and I realize, oh, that's not a black stick. It's a snake.
Yep.
So, long story short, I didn't go near that snake, but an hour and a half, 2 hours later on the way down, we head down, and we kind of got a little messed up on this little trail crossing thing. So I'm like, hey, I'm just going to follow the stream down a little further and catch up with the trail. And I ran into the same damn snake on the other side of the river, in a completely different location. So it was not my day.
Yeah. It's part of some of my favorite moments for coming up with story ideas is, like when I go for a walk every day in the woods, and like you'll be walking along, and like you'll, out of the corner of your eye, you'll think you'll see a face,
Mm-hmm.
or you'll see like something in the woods that's not actually there. I love those moments where like it's a tree or it's a rock or something, but for a moment I saw somebody sitting there.
Right.
I love those moments for sort of like that's I feel like that's when I'm connected to whatever it is that makes me want to tell stories. Is those moments.
So what was it like? What was the first, I guess, for you, bit of permission that you gave yourself to write a story, like for real, not just on your own at home as a young person?
I think the first stories that were really me trying to be a writer or to write something. After college, I found a book by Gene Wolfe, and I read it, and I just thought, wow, like this is there's a place for me in speculative fiction with this. Mm-hmm. Like this is speaking to me in a way that other things I've read have not. And I think that Gene Wolfe has kind of been a touchstone from my writing and my work for a long time. And so I think, and then, of course, then what I do, if I find, same thing with art, with comic books, with writers, I think we might all be kind of obsessive, especially if you're a comic person. I think very obsessive people become comic book fans. You buy everything. And so I searched out, and read every book, even his first book, which was pretty expensive at that point, but it's always really rewarding to me because it was so bad. And it was just a miserable, you couldn't publish this book nowadays, like the quality, standard quality now for comics, for illustration, for writing is so much higher than it was, like Michael Swanwick talks a lot about how, up until about 82, 83, you could read every book that came out every year in speculative fiction. Like you could actually, you could be on top of everybody's work. And then it just blew up, and it's like, there's no way you can read all these books. But I love finding a writer or an artist and finding the very first thing that they put out, because I want to have hope that I can do it too. Because when you read something that's like amazing, or you see someone's work that is like, just mind blowing, and it just feels impossible. I love finding those early things where you're like, oh, you're just looking at Jorge Zafino, and you did that, and then you probably read this book on perspective. So I think that there's, I love being a completist. I'm just a inveterate,
same way.
And but I love finding things like that, and making my way through the progression, and reminding myself that there is hope for all of us to achieve our dreams, I guess.
It is comforting. It is also heartbreaking when you see those rare people, when you see the early stuff, you're like, wow, you really were so much better than everyone else early on. But they're very few and far between. But it is, this is, I hear a common thing in our talk is there's this forensic observation that you have, like you are forensically observing all the things of interest to you. So if it is artwork or music or books or the environment, you're really looking at it with a forensic eye.
I think that you can I think part of this is probably natural, but part of it also comes from trying to become a good artist in my 30s. I really didn't become a good artist until, like 34, I think was when I got my first job. I never honestly believed in my heart that I would make it and that I would get good. I thought I would stink for the rest of my life. And it's amazing that I figured it out. But the way that I figured it out was to break things down to as simple as they could be. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't understand value. And so the only way I could understand value is to only have two, black or white. And that's why my work looks the way it does, is that for me to understand value and composition, I couldn't deal with the grayscale. It had to be either black or white, Sharpie or white paint. And that was and by being so bad at it and having to really break it down into its basic components, now I feel like I do it pretty well, and I do composition because I was so bad at it. So for me, when I briefly taught, a student is like, I want to make it more exciting. I want it to be vibrant. And it's like, how do you do that? You don't, turn on the vibrant filter. You deal with value, shape, edges, lines, these are the things that you can study, and that's what will make it better. And that's, so for me, with anything, is like, if you can take the trappings of it away and break it down into its simplest components, that's how you will get better. If you don't try to like multitask, for me, color, if you added color, it's like, I'm juggling enough balls now, and you throw color in there and they're all going to fall down. So, right. But because I can do color now, I just don't want to. It's like you break it down to as simple as you can, the things that you can actually learn. And, like for writing, instead of trying to write a novel, write a good paragraph, write a good sentence, right. Instead of bloviating for, 100 word sentence, nail it. And, verb, subject, whatever. And again, I keep talking about having hope. That's how I have hope that I can learn this, and sure. I can get where I want to go, because every day is a battle against despair, and you have to find ways of having hope that you will get there. And I have to look back instead of just looking forward and say, I have come way further than I thought I would. And so there's hope for my students when I was a teacher. There's hope for me that seemingly impossible mountain can be climbed if you just focus on what's in front of you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to look at it, and I'm gonna keep those words in my mind for a while.
I'm just saying it myself, really. Like,
yeah, but you're saying it to yourself. But these are the things that everybody. I mean, listen, a lot of people struggle with finding the clarity to help them push forward, rather than just sort of kind of like with your eyes closed, waving forward and just doing the thing. You have to do it with some intention, and giving yourself, that moment to think. And if you can think about it, then you can create some sort of intention and move forward with purpose. And I think that's all you're saying.
I did a class, probably my last class visit for a long time, but I had been saying I would do this for a couple of years for the Kansas City Art Institute. And it was a lot of fun. It was through Zoom. And most of the students, the things that they were struggling with and having issues with were not really, they were in a great place to learn art. What they were struggling with was their emotions and their feelings and like their sense of self, and just struggling with these, things that when you're that age, you are struggling with. And so much of my time, which I hope I would help with, was telling them that it's okay, that this is you have to be kind to yourself. You can't beat yourself up all the time. It can't be, you can't, I certainly remember throwing paintings across the room and deleting files, and, I have been there. Everybody has, but you have to find a way to be kind to yourself and to create a space for that's healthy for you. And I hope that the schools are continuing to provide the sort of thing for them rather than having the one person that shows up once a year.
The shining light.
Right. But it's, I think that I did an experiment once, which has actually influenced a lot of how I listen to music often when I work, but it never has words. And once I went 6 months without listening to, it had to be all instrumental, because so much music with words that you can understand is about how life stinks. And it's about how, it's like you're just sitting there all day listening to somebody be like, my life is horrible and my girlfriend left me and blah, 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 blah. And doesn't life stink? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and you're just sitting along with it, like, life stinks. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. It's not worth living without you. Blah. And it's like you're subliminally putting yourself in this thing where you're just miserable. And I felt so much better cutting out music with words. And I think that you actually have to think about the environment you're creating for yourself. Be able to stop the conversations you have in your head, be like, this is just a conversation. This is not real life. Like sometimes, like have a conversation with my wife in my head, like, why didn't you put the dishes in the dishwasher? Blah, blah, blah. And she comes home and I'm all angry and she's like, what's wrong? And it's like, oh, I just had a conversation with you in my head. This is totally like just me.
Right.
It has nothing.
By the way, I won.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with you. So much of life, of trying to achieve these sort of goals and is just emotion management and trying to be kind to yourself. Treat yourself as if you're your best friend instead of yourself.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, man, like contextualize what it is for you. The win doesn't have to be everything. All right. Well, let's tie it up here, because I think that you and I could keep talking for a lot longer, and maybe we'll have to get back together and do a kind of an art talk and just really kind of go into some technique and process there. But what's the easiest way for people to find you, even though you are, controlling your social media?
I'm on Instagram, Jeffrey Allen Love. And I have a Substack that I very rarely put out.
Sweet.
Substack.com, I believe, and a website, jeffreyallenlove.com. And then I think that's it. And my publisher, who does a lot of my books, Flusk Publications, he's more active than I am on that stuff.
He's got a great feed. And I love when you do your videos when you do a drawing. I'm typically not a video person, but when I see them, I'm fascinated by your process. So
we'll have to talk about it next time.
I'll put all the links in the description. All right. Well, Jeff, thanks so much. I mean, I've really been looking forward to talking with you. This has been a super big treat for me. And go get your kid. And I'll talk to everyone soon. All right.
Good. Thanks for having me.